Welcome to the Service MVP podcast, and my name is Joe Crisara, America's service sales coach. And we have with me a great friend of mine who I've known, we ran through parallel universes together. We have a history that we both have a passion for making people succeed. I'd like to introduce everybody, Jack Tester. Jack, say hi.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me on. Hello, everyone. Good to be here on
Well,
the
a
other
lot of
side of
people.
the fence. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, yeah, it's okay. Always have been working for the same purpose,
That's
but
right.
just two different parallel universes to get there. And definitely, I've always had so much admiration and respect for everything you have accomplished and done. Jack, if you don't know who he is, he worked as was a president of Nexstar. Would I be correct in saying that? Is that a good
Good
title?
enough. Yeah, that's
That's
good.
not bad. You got that. I mean, who wouldn't want that on their resume, right?
That's cool.
So
Yeah.
it's a great thing to have on your resume, Jack. And he not only was the president, but he did a lot of sweat equity in that company, doing a lot of things there. Jack, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started and how you wound up being where you were in that position, and where you're
Sure.
at today. Give us a little thumbnail, if you don't mind, for five
All
minutes
right.
about a brief thumbnail about Jack Tester, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah, you bet. I was out of college, didn't know what to do, got a job at entry level for a trade association, the Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors in Minnesota, and did that for a number of years. And then I met a guy named Frank Blau. Frank was a contractor in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Many people listening will know who he is. Many won't. But he was the originator, the inventor of upfront pricing, or what he called flat rate pricing in Milwaukee. A very successful plumbing contractor, and he had a burning desire to help, what he said, turn the world's best mechanics and the world's best businessmen and women. And I had met Frank. I'd hired him to come in and do some seminars for PHCC there here in Minnesota. And Frank took a shine to me. He saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. There was potential. And he had this idea for a new organization that would help, again, teach contractors how to make money. Because the truth of the matter is, back then, this is in the early 90s, 1990, 91, when I met Frank, the average contractor was a mom and pop shop. They weren't making money. They were just making wages. They weren't a great employer. There wasn't a business model. There was no one upfront pricing, or what Frank called flat rate pricing, right? So Frank started this organization. He asked me to come on board as the first employee to get started. So, we were a complete invention, Joe. I'm talking about what's now called Nexstar. It was called Contractors 2000 at the time. And we were just a complete invention. There was nothing like us that we knew of. We just had this idea. So it was an altruistic organization that was set up not to make money for itself, but just to help its members be successful. And so I was right there day one, employee one, getting it started, running it. And I did that for just about 7 years and got it off the ground. And we were making some noise in the industry, and that was fun. And then I left for a period of 7 years and went to work for ServiceMaster, which just bought Rescue Rooter and ARS. Moved my family to Memphis, Tennessee, helped them run that business for 7 years. It was a public company at the time. It went private. And I didn't want to do that at that point in my career. And so I came back to Nexstar as a business coach, coaching manager, and then the former CEO, the person that was in place, a good guy named Greg Nemi, retired in 2011, and they asked me to be the CEO again. And I was very fortunate to run the organization from 2011 until I stepped away as CEO in 2020, and then fully retired from Nexstar in September of 2023. So that took me, so I had 30 plus years watching an embryonic industry become mature, kind of like you, Joe, right? So that's my thumbnail.
Yeah,
And
time
now
flies. Time
it
flies when you're
does.
having fun. Time flies when you're having fun. I mean, it seems like it just yesterday. I remember you getting from Greg getting a position. It seems like, man, 20 years goes by like a snap at my age.
It does. Well, especially at your age, Joe. Just kidding. No, it goes
Well,
by quick. It goes by quick, right? You know,
that's that Minnesota. That's a damning me with faint praise, Jack. See,
oh, it's all good.
that's how you know he's a friend, right?
That's right. That's
You would
right.
never say he wouldn't say anything like that to a complete stranger. But
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
anyway, Jack, today we're going to do. I mean, we could just talk. And I mean, seriously, I could talk. I met you at Plumbers with
Yes.
for the first time ever in real person, we met at Eco Plumbers, where you happen to be doing some work with them personally with Aaron Gaynor over there, and that was like, he's like, hey, Joe, can I hang out with you while you're here? I'm like, hell yeah! I mean, this is like, I had to pinch myself to think I could spend a week with Jack Tester, So I had a great time. We had a great week that week, and definitely the biggest thing I remember is I made a new friend. That was the thing that was the most rewarding thing, because I've seen you from afar, but you probably same with me too. But
Well,
sometimes
likewise.
it's just like sometimes it's just something we just didn't realize how much we had in common.
That's right. That's right. And I think we're going to talk about some of that today. That's, that there has been, your company, Contractor Selling and Service MVP, have been the primary competitor of Nexstar from a sales perspective, for sure. Your name came up more than anyone else's, and you had the staying power as well. So it was fun to finally meet you, Joe. Right now I'm working with Eco Plumbers, electricians, and HVAC technicians in Ohio, enjoying the heck out of that great company. And they wanted to learn some things from you, brought you in, and I had to make sure I was in town. I still live in St. Paul. I don't live in Ohio. So I had to make sure I was in town just to see what was going on and to get a chance to meet you. And I sure enjoyed that. So that kind of led to our conversation today, I think. So,
and for the record, everybody wants to know, it's like, I do support Nexstar, so I have no animosity. Matter of fact, I probably have I can at least count 19 people specifically that are turning to be some of the leaders at Nexstar. Brad and Sarah Casper, I said, you need to join Nexstar to learn that part, because that's something I'm not going to be able to be there. So, I mean, I can see probably 19 to 23 people I can remember. 19 for sure, I think I counted that I know are there still because of it. So truthfully, I've never been an adversary, but I definitely have had a lot of respect. And truthfully, I look at it this way: when both of us are running a race together, we both get in much better shape because we're having to put that work in, and that's it. So let's go over the things that we're going to cover today. The difference, so the things we both have witnessed, which is the difference between people who get information like from places like PHCC or Nexstar, or just things they see in plain sight from our competitors, going to trade association meetings or going to events, and then people who do something with the information and who are succeeding with the information. That's really the title of this thing today. So what do you think is the difference between the people who have the information available to them but just don't do something with it, and people who succeed with it? Jack, can you start with anything spitball with me?
Some thoughts. I'll reflect on that, because it's always been, you take an organization like Nexstar, and we have hundreds and hundreds of members, and some of them doing fantastic and some of them not. And then you say, well, they got the same information, Joe. They have the same website. They've been to the same training, got the same coaches. Everything's the same. Yet we got this difference of result, which if it was just the information, the results would be the same, right? And I know you've seen this too. One of the things I reflected on is a sentence, I think, that encapsulates some of the issues. So someone goes to a training event for Nexstar, and I'm sure Service MVP, and I'll bet you're going to nod your head and say you've heard this. They'll say, hey, what do you think about all this? Let's just pretend it's a service system, which was a flagship program, still is of Nexstar. And they'll say, well, I'm kind of doing that already. I don't know how many times I've heard that, kind of doing it already. Right. And so what happens is they go to a training event, and there might be 2 or 3 things that they hear that do align with some of their daily habits and behaviors. And they check the box, feel pretty good. And then there's some other stuff that doesn't align, but they kind of grab on to maybe 20% of it that aligns and 80% that doesn't. And then they don't do anything else. It's almost like they're there to confirm some of what they're already doing, but not change. Right. And so the thing I see with the successful companies is they go to a Nexstar event or they go to a Service MVP event, and they just go all in, Joe. One thing I heard, I had the benefit, you didn't know this, but when I was with Eco here, I went through your video training program. I wanted to learn it because we were putting some more electricians through it. It was an online class, and I got to listen to you. Total immersion. It was like this song was like, yeah, right? But it was awesome. So anyway. One of the things you said is that with your program, and I'll just say this with Nexstar too, or any grounded program, is that do the whole thing. And if you only do half of it, don't blame us for the half that doesn't work. I remember you saying that, and I thought it was a brilliant statement, right? So great companies go all in. They don't do 20%, they do 90% or 100%. And I've thought about this, there's, they're not stupid. People aren't dumb. They're fighting a couple forces in their head. The first is confirmation bias, which is we tend to want to hear information that already supports that which we already believe, and anything else we don't want. So we lock into the things that we agree with already. And the second is cognitive dissonance, which is when we encounter information, Joe, that's different than that which we believe or that which we're doing, we can only do one of two things, because it creates this confusion in our head, like, oh gosh, I got this new information now. Joe just said something. I've got to do these voluntary commitments. I've never done this before. I don't think I should. What should I do? And you've got to do one of two things. You either got to dismiss the information so you get out of dissonance, or you got to change. You got to change your beliefs and you got to change your actions. Well, what's easier? It's easier to dismiss it. I don't like Joe. I don't like Nexstar, right? This kind of thing. So don't feel bad about this. It's just that's what we're fighting, right? But you got to fight through it. You got to do the whole thing. You got to do the whole thing. And I think, what's different today, and I've reflected on this a little bit more, is, Joe, we have a mature industry now, meaning the business model is codified. 30 years ago, the reason Nexstar came into existence 30 plus years ago is because we didn't know how to run a business. And so we were cobbling together best practices. Contractor selling didn't occur. Wasn't out there. There wasn't anything out there. It was starting to emerge, but it was still very embryonic.
Yep.
Well, today, Joe, as you know, the way to run a business it's not hidden. It's not in the hands of only a few. It's widely accessible. So if you're going to go all in with information, go all in with someone who's been doing it for a while, like a Nexstar, like a Joe Crisara, right? Nexstar's been around since 1992. Joe, and how long have you been at this thing? It's been a long time, because I've heard your name since, what, 2007?
Well, in this, yeah. But truthfully, being a contractor, I was in a room with Frank Blau. He didn't see anything great in me at the time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cognitive dissonance. So
I wasn't that, but I didn't dismiss. No, I did not dismiss it. He gave me He gave me a fire inside of me that's like, I'm gonna freaking show this bastard, because he kind of broke me down. But I'm not a quitter, Jack. I'm the kind of person who's like, I'm gonna learn this shit, show that dude. I never actually talked to him again, but truthfully, it's one of the driving moments that changed my life. Even though I could have listened. You might even have been at that meeting at the ABC Plumbing in Buffalo Grove.
We talked about this. It was in display.
In Buffalo Grove, Illinois, and I was there, and they called together a bunch of people to see if they could get people involved. It was just getting started, and they asked me $5,000, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I had $5,000. I would. I could have been part of Nexstar for $5,000 at the time, but inflation does take its toll at the period of time.
No, that's awesome.
But seriously, it was one of the great motivators of my life. And, I hear the same thing, Jack. It's like, oh yeah, I already know all this stuff. Or how about this one? Yeah, I take a little bit from here and take a little bit from there, and I just try to make the best of it, that kind of a thing. So, it's kind of so if you hear, so I think if the audience out there, if you hear yourself saying this, oh yeah, I already know that, or I take a little here, a little there, that's kind of like not all in.
Yeah.
You're not all in at that point. You're kind of just on the fence trying to take a little bit from here and there. Like you're trying to wait and see what everybody else is going to do. And then waiting and seeing is not a way to be successful in the contracting business. Do you agree with that?
Well,
Jack?
Especially today, Joe. I mean, we know it's, 30 years ago, I would guess there was still some confusion, but there's a track record now of what it takes to run a successful service replacement business. So it's not a mystery anymore. You go to an organization like a Nexstar or your organization, and they give you information that's proven time and again to work. It's what a gift. Just do it. Just frickin' do it, and get after it and get the benefit. I was thinking about this, Joe, but I want to be careful here. I don't say listen to everyone. What'd be fun for me and you to do someday is to take a list and make of all the names of all the gurus, consultants, people that we should listen to that have promoted themselves as an expert, and make a big long list of them, and then make a long list of those that have been around for a while. It'd be a lot shorter. And
would be.
there are enough people, there are enough organizations now in our industry that have a track record of success that you could lean into, where you could trust the information. You could trust that their intentions are right. And that's what I would suggest. And once you find that source of information, get after it, right? So that'd be the first thing that the successful companies do. They just go all in, right? And they don't try to rationalize why they shouldn't change. They just do it. Right?
I think it's great advice to say, to find the motivation, because if you can't find the underlying motivation as to why people are doing this for you, and Frank Blau was a great example of that. That guy I mean, although he was definitely a fan of making a profitable business, his money was not his master. He had a fire inside of him to get people to move a certain direction, and that had nothing to do with money. It was just like to help people. It was really it was his passion, and sometimes the passion boiled over into super passion, but it was definitely I felt it. That's what I experienced, was washed over me, was the passion that this guy's trying to help me and trying to reach his hand out to me. And I'm like, you know what? I just didn't have the finance at the time. I had the resources, but once I did, I really gained it, and tried to get as much as I could from it. Definitely, I eventually did wind up selling to that company eventually. So it was one of the highlights of my career there. It was. It all worked out great. Yeah.
That's cool.
But Jack, what else we have? What else is? I mean, let's
Sure.
go all in. Whatever you're gonna do, don't do anything. So don't do it. Be decisive and do everything 100%. Don't do. If you're gonna make a decision, go all in on that decision.
If you ever hear
Through your
yourself
training
saying,
or
"I'm
things
kind of
like
doing
that.
that already," you're not. You're saying, "I'm kind of doing that already," means you're not.
That's
Right.
good point there.
The other thing is when you start to embark on a business development process, and you're starting to learn, take your employees with you, Joe. What I mean by that is not metaphorically, but actually physically, take them with you. We as leaders or owners of a business, oftentimes I'll see people come to a Nexstar event over the years, and just the one owner, or the owner and his or her wife, will come, to the event. And what I see these companies that really make it happen, they've got a little posse coming in there. They've got their different leaders and people they want to expose. Because I tell you what, it's, let's talk about a change process that happens in our head as leaders or owners of a business. So we hear about a Nexstar or a Joe Crisara or something else, and we start to research it a little bit, and then we call a couple people that, "Hey, what do you think of Joe?" And they, "Oh, Joe's pretty great. You should do his stuff." Oh, okay. So then they go off to see Joe, and they get fired up, and then they come home and they tell everybody how cool it is. But meanwhile, this process in their mind took weeks, and now they come home to their employees and say, "Here's what we're doing." Ta-da! And their employees are like gobsmacked, like, "What the hell is this?" Right? I didn't know this was coming. And then we say things like this, which is really hurtful. We say our employees aren't good at change. They're reluctant, they're resistant, they're stuck. But we forget that it took us 3 weeks to get there. Now we expect them to get there in a day or two, and they haven't seen what we've seen. And they're just listening to our voice, right? And you can't be a prophet in your own hometown, Joe. That's how the good. Right.
Yeah, it's like a thing about responsibility, right? Like, it's like my employee. So the problem is my employees aren't ready for this change. Where it's like, I didn't. How could you put that and take responsibility? Like, you know what? I didn't do a good job of preparing my employees for this change. It's really the real. And another golden nugget. I mean, I just learned right now. What's hidden in plain sight. Again, that's what Jack always does. He reveals things that are hidden in plain sight. Like the thing where somebody comes there and only the husband comes, but the wife is running the company still, or he only sends the one sales guy and he doesn't come himself. So in a way, you're right. I think the teams that do succeed is, I guess, I don't know if you met Tommy Mello, who I've recently, one of the newer gurus that I've met. Tommy said, it's a very true statement. He said, how do you build $1 billion business? And he says, write this down. He goes, not by yourself. You need to have your team with you every step of the way. You got to make sure that team is with you. If you're
Yeah.
going to go to an event, bring your team to that event. So he gave that same advice, and it's amazing how great minds think alike. And who knows? He probably learned it from you when you said this.
Oh,
So but
yeah.
the bottom line is, I think that's I think it's a lot of people don't. I don't want to just bypass that, because I think that's an important, that when a lot of times people approach me and I'm like, well,
Yeah.
now I learned though, Jack. I'm like, you know what? It sounds like a great idea. We'd have to bring this in front of the team,
Yes.
because it's not going to be Joe Crisara is going to win this one. It's you have to win this with the team here. But Jack, thanks for that goal, because I hope everybody resonates with that. Because if you're a husband and wife business, Brad and Sarah, as two people I mentioned before,
Sure.
they didn't do it separately. They did it together.
Sure
When
did.
only Sarah was running the service and Brad was doing construction, he joined the service together is when that thing blew up. That's when it worked out. I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't mean to hijack your initiative. I just wanted to say how much I got from that. Thank you so much.
I'd like to add
Good.
another thing to that too, Joe. Is back in the day, there was only live events. And there is something magical about being in person and connecting with people. So when I say bring your team, that doesn't mean, let them listen to a podcast or some video, telecast. I really recommend that you go in person to these things. You go visit companies together. You go to events live together. There's a magic. There's something that occurs that you can't replicate on a screen. So when I say, take your employees on the journey with you, I mean literally take them with you. If you're learning and get out in the world, go to different companies, go to different events, take them with you. That it's not just the event itself; it's the conversations that happen pre and post. It's the dinner that night. You watch a 30 podcast or listen to a 30-minute video training, and then you go about the rest of your day. Yeah, it's helpful. I don't say we shouldn't do that, but if you really want transformation, I think that happens in a transformative event, which is almost always live, Joe. So I guess maybe I'm old school, but it's worth the investment. It's worth the time. And if you're not willing to make the time to do it, do you really care? Are you really all in? Or are
Right.
you kind of dabbling? No one likes a dabbler, right? So
Not at all. I
that's
tell you what, people ask me, right? They said, actually, last week we just had this meeting, and it's like we have all this technology, our e-learning, all that kind of stuff. I was like, guys, understand the fastest way to get somebody from where they're at now to where they want to be is a live event, because that's where you can't get away from it. I think we were very fortunate. We called the name of our training Total Immersion,
yeah,
which is really, it's a great name, because that's what it is. When you go to a place like the Nexstar, service training, there you are in Minnesota. I think it used to be Chaska, Minnesota, was it? Or
back
you're
in the
still there?
day. Yeah,
That's back in the day. I mean,
yeah,
you're locked down there up in
yeah,
Minnesota. We're going to fly to Minnesota, you're going to sit down in his place, and you're going to be immersed in that training. It's the same with us here. It's like when you get away from the normal
yeah.
distractions, you are your team creates a bond, and then
Right.
you're creating a bond with the community of other people. That's really the strength of Nexstar, is that Nexstar
It's,
network. They call it a
it is.
network. It's just the thing
It
about it.
is.
It's the thing that the network part is bigger than the actual Nexstar itself, because that's the thing that people are going to get. So you're going to get that connection. You're going to get that personal, other resources that you normally wouldn't have access to, and your team's going to get a bond too. I believe that.
Yeah. I just can't agree more with it, and I think it kind of ties into the first one, be all in, if you're just sponsoring video training, are you all in? Or are you just trying to do it on the cheap? I heard John Maxwell say it one time to me. We were doing a podcast. It was fascinating. He goes, so Jack, the longest distance between 2 points is a shortcut. And that's kind of what video training can be sometimes, right? You think, oh, let's just do it quick. I know change takes a little bit of time, and leadership development happens there too. So I think enough said on that one. Take your
Mhm.
employees with you on the journey. Really physically take them.
Got it. Got it. Any final thoughts, Jack? What do you think? You got
Well,
a few more minutes to wrap this thing up. What do you got? Any final
yeah,
words of wisdom for us? What do you think?
I guess the one thing, and 30 years ago, Joe, I remember the very first speaker we had at Nexstar was a guy named Michael Gerber who wrote the E-Myth. We just debuted the organization, and he came out and he talked about the importance of process, which is best practices. right? You know, that's what he talked about, documenting that so the business can run without you, right? Great, get it. You know, what was kind of missing from that, and don't blame Michael for this at all, is leadership. And now it's kind of front and center in the world. We talk about leadership all the time, but you know, at a senior level of the business, co-employees recently, and they said, I want to kind of be the kind of boss that I wish I had. Meaning that they want to be an awesome leader. And of course, their people under them are responding quite well because of their functions are doing fantastic. So leadership matters, right? This idea that when the goal of best practice isn't to train our employees, the goal is really first to get the leader to evolve, to get the senior leader to grow. When I tell you, I've seen this and I've done this, you know, and I've you know, when people witness the senior leader growing in character, growing in competence and leadership, displaying new skills that they didn't have before, acting in a way that was different than before. And that doesn't happen overnight, but they step back and say, "Wow, Joe's different. Wow, Jack's different. Wow, you know, whoever's different." That creates an example and a stimulus for them to grow too. But if you don't do those things, Joe, as a leader, I don't care how good you are, if you're not continuing to evolve, you will stagnate. And so your company will not get better. So at the senior leader, right, it is about their growth, not just growing the service manager and growing the technicians and all of that. They just have to witness it up and down and through, and then it becomes something that's kind of expected. And I heard that so much. You know, I'm not taking credit for this, Joe, because I've worked for the best practice organization. I felt as a leader of it, I had to continue to grow. And people would say to me like, "Geez, Jack, you're different than you were 5 years ago." And therefore I felt like I needed to be different. And you know what? I get it, right? I get it. So I think that last thing is as you invest in people, as you invest in process and best practice, invest in yourself as a leader. Understand that if you're the same leader you are today, a year from now, you're going to be disappointed. And then, of course, what you're going to do is you're going to blame the half that doesn't work, right? You're going to blame Nexstar doesn't work, or, you know, service MVP maybe work in big cities, but it don't work, you know, whatever the excuse is, right? You know, we hear it, right?
I get it. Yeah, I think that's where it is. It's like it goes back to what I mentioned before in the first thing about taking responsibility. I think to me that's where leadership starts, is by I think there's always problems that every company have, and even individual people have, both in their marriage and in their business and in their normal life, and their family life too. And I think leadership to me is the day you start taking responsibility for those issues and start saying, you know what, I'm going to own up to my part of those issues, and not blame, not start with other people. Start with my part of that in a way. Jack, does that seem fair to say?
Well, if you're running a company, Joe, you're responsible for the whole enchilada. You hire the people, you pick the marketing company, you pick the sales training platform, you picked it all, or let it happen, I should say. So you're ultimately responsible for every behavior in your company, and you can't just, you know, you can change people, but you can't blame them. You know, you hired them. So you can just get better from it, right? And again, it doesn't mean that you got to beat yourself up and hate yourself because you're a bad leader, because we all, you know, leadership isn't about perfection. It's about improvement, right? Getting better. And so, yeah, I think it is. Ultimately, if you're a responsible leader, if you always say to yourself, what did I do, or what didn't I do that helped to contribute to the result we got? And then how do I endeavor to get better? Boy, that's a mindset that works, Joe. That's a mindset that works. But so many leaders, well, here's what they do. You can't sell anything right now, Joe, because the election's coming up. No one wants to buy it. No, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and it's, you know, everybody spent all their stimulus money, Joe. You can't sell anything.
That's all it was. It's easy to blame if you start going to blame the federal government, you're a deep shit.
You're done.
It's like,
No.
so what does Jack Tester do now that he's got plenty? You have an unending inventory of time So are you sitting back in your rocking chair, or tell us
Me?
what are some of the activities of Jack Tester now that he's free to do what he wants to do?
Well,
Tell me about those things.
I still it's interesting. So I deeply love Nexstar, and I stepped away as a CEO and then stayed on as an advisor and did some leadership coaching for them, and decided, it's time to move on. And I don't mean that in negative. I love Nexstar; it's doing great. It was never a cult of personality for me, that's for sure, because I don't have much personality. So it was really set up well. It's doing good, and but I needed to let them do their thing, and I very fortunate. One of our members, Plumbers, electricians, and HVAC technicians in Ohio, a good friend of mine, Aaron Gaynor, Mike Barnhart, are the owners, and they asked me to come on, and I work in a part-time capacity to help with them with leadership development. Kind of a senior advisor to them. Do that on a part-time basis, but it's very engaging. I'm very passionate about it. I love doing it. I'm very fortunate to be there. It's a great organization. Thankful for this, and what it allows me to do is, Joe, I like to golf. So I golf a lot more than I would have if I was running a Nexstar full time. I got 2 bird dogs, love to hunt. So I get out in the fall. I'm chasing birds around and following those dogs around. I don't mind yard work. I like to cook. I just want to spend time with my family. By the way, today is my 37th wedding anniversary. So I've been
Congratulations. That's amazing.
It is
Thank
amazing.
You.
Very proud of
37. I always, one of my lines is that 37 years is like 150 years in the old days,
No, it can't be longer. No. By the way, it's a woman too. So just FYI.
And it's a day-to-day struggle to make sure you create value in the marriage too. It's
not easy. You know what? You got to grow. That's for sure.
You better.
Yeah. So those are the things I'm doing now, Joe. I'm very fortunate to for a lot of things. I'm fortunate that I stumbled into this industry. I'm just didn't pick it out, failed into it. Fortunate I met Frank. Fortunate they asked me to start Nexstar. Fortunate to have met so many good people that have added value to my world and that I could help, including people like yourself later in life. And so right now I feel very honored to be able to help Eco, and very honored to have a little more time and enjoying. Just fortunate, Joe. I'm lucky. How's that?
Well, I feel the same way right now, Jack, and I know our listeners feel super unfortunate as well too. Jack, thanks so much for taking a few minutes coming out with us here today, and definitely I appreciate. I thought I was going to meet a great colleague. Or even somebody I could look at as a mentor, just as some of the stuff I see you create. But I didn't know I was going to meet as a bonus an amazing friend, and so that definitely I will cherish till the day I die. So definitely thank you so much for that, Jack. I appreciate you. Everybody have a great one. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you, Jack.
All right, thank you, Joe. Bye.